The morning smelled like coffee and cold salt. I cracked the diner's door and felt the hinge whisper a tired breath in an old chest. The dock creaked in its patient rhythm. Gulls made a thin needling sound above the masts. I set the first pot to percolate and watched steam braid itself into the window light. That was when my phone trembled on the counter. Daniel's name. His voice was warm on the surface, empty underneath like a cup left overnight. "Don't worry, Ma," he said. The line went quiet. And the quiet said more. I wrapped waffles in a towel and took the shore road toward the cabin. The air that morning smelled like betrayal. I heard them before I saw them, laughter that didn't belong to the water, a radio throbbing an out-of-town beat. I stepped onto our porch boards and felt them answer my weight with a tired groan. Inside, heat ran heavy from the stove thick with butter and pepper. Ava stood at the counter smiling for too many people, her voice pitched careful, her eyes set to polite. Daniel was outside at the wash basin, sleeves rolled, shoulders curled, scrubbing a skillet like he was trying to erase his reflection from the steel. "Daniel towels," Gloria called, not turning. "Cole, more eggs." She spoke with the confidence of ownership, the kind only practice can purchase. Two girls with matching bracelets had their feet on my low table. A man in a ball cap leaned against my pantry. 8 mouths their words spilling like shells across the floor. I set down the towel-wrapped waffles and listened to the small click in my pocket, the old brass keys shifting restless, telling me what I already knew. At the diner, our tip jar is blue glass. Most mornings it sings when quarters kiss the bottom. Lately it had gone quiet. Silence remembers. You know when a sound that should be there simply isn't. That jar had been light for a week, maybe 2. I blamed the rain, the ferry schedule, anything but the grasping hands that were now reaching for a plate my son washed. He tried to smile when he saw me. Good boy, good man. That soft habit of making it easy for everyone else. I touched his forearm. The heat under his skin surprised me. The heat of overworked muscles. The heat of a tired heart. Inside the bedroom, pillows were fluffed, the blanket folded into a perfect hotel triangle. Gloria's bag sat open on the trunk zippers, shining like small teeth. On the dresser, my husband's compass, once Daniel's favorite toy, was nudged aside by perfume. I found the couch in the den, rumpled, an extra blanket wrinkled in the shape of his back. So that was the trade. A master bed for a polite son, a door that closed for a couch that didn't. Only special people, my husband used to say, tapping our boy's forehead when the world felt cruel. Only special people make room for others. I used to believe him without the second half that special does not mean foolish. That kindness without a gate is a flood. Ma, Daniel said, voice low, as if the walls had ears. They're here till the weekend, but weekend lives in the mouth of whoever wants to stay. In the skillet's shine, I saw my own face. And the pink dress I once wore on a poor summer Sunday sat hem to hem with a man who promised me we would never live small again. Memory does this. It threads the present through an older needle. I stood in the doorway to the kitchen and watched the choreography. Ava reached, served, smiled again. Gloria's gestures were neat, efficient fingers snapping toward the boy in the cap. The girls laughed loud like they were marking territory. The radio turned up a little, then a little more. The house did not sound like us. "Daniel, sweetie, Gloria said this pan is still greasy." He scrubbed harder. Heat rose to his cheeks. I saw the small flinch in his shoulders when she used that voice, the one that pats your head and takes your chair. "Enough," I said, but only in my mouth. The words sat there warm as a coal. "Where's the sugar one?" Bracelet Girl asked without looking at Ava. "These eggs are cold." The cap man checked the fridge like it was a map to his inheritance. A child's sticky hand ran along the hallway, fingers printing the wall. The radio beat didn't match the tide. In the diner, I keep the tip jar under the counter at night. 2 mornings ago, it felt wrong in my hands, lighter by a day's worth. I thought of the bracelets, the cap, the neat little smile on a woman who had claimed the best pillow for her spine. Silence remembers. The brass keys in my pocket clicked again. I swear they did, like teeth together. I have 2 kinds of anger, one that burns quick and makes a scene, the other that warms the room and stays until the soup is done. This was the second kind. I set the waffle towel on the table, folded it once, and watched butter lose its shape. "Ma," Daniel asked, stepping in from the basin water, slicking his forearms. I touched his wrist as if I were checking a pulse. "Too fast." "I'm all right," he whispered. He was not. People can say all right the way a house can look fine from the road while the joists rot. "Good morning," I said to the room, and the word good fell like a coin into that quiet jar. Gloria straightened. She smiled the suburban smile. "It looks like kindness and smells like possession." "We didn't expect company," she said as if I were the stranger. The bracelets glanced up, then down again, already bored by the old woman at the threshold. "Only special people," I heard in my head. "Only special people. Open the door." But doors also close. "Ma, don't worry," Daniel said again. That phrase was chewing itself now. Don't worry is what the young say when they have decided to hold the weight themselves. I looked at Ava. She was still smiling, but her eyes had gone simplified. That is a dangerous thing when a woman edits herself to survive a morning. All the while, the house had another conversation with me. The floorboards told me where the night had been heavy. The bed told me where the dream had not been kind. The couch told me where my son's back would ache in a week. The brass keys pushed cold against my thigh like a nudge from a friend. Remember what you own so you can protect what you love. I stepped to the sink, reached for a towel, and felt the heat from the dishwater climb my fingers. Heat. My mother used to say heat means life returning. She would press my hands around a teacup and tell me to breathe until I felt my own bones again. I took that breath. "Morning," I said, and let the quiet grow a spine. "Daniel, eat while it's hot." He started to protest, then saw my face and sat. 2 words carry a house back to itself. Sit, eat. The cap man cleared his throat as if to reclaim the air. He didn't. "Would you have done the same if you felt this kind of silence? Tell me below." From the porch, I could see the lighthouse on the breakwater. It turned its slow white face toward us, then away, then back again, the way a mother checks a sleeping child. The gulls had gone quiet at last. The radio song ended and left a shape in the room where noise had been. Only special people, I thought, staring at the keys in my palm. Only special people know when to open and when to close. I am not a performer. I am a keeper of doors. I have lived too many years to confuse welcome with surrender. The pink dress in my memory had a loose seam at the shoulder. I stitched it with fishing line because that was what we had. It held. Strength is sometimes ugly practical and very clean. Here's what my body knew even before my mouth did. The bed in the den had my son's imprint. The master pillow held Gloria's perfume. The tip jar had lost its song. A house can survive many things, but not contempt. The first repairs are done with words. "Gloria," I said softly, "we'll have a talk after breakfast." She smiled again. It didn't reach her eyes. "Of course," she said. "Families talk." Her tone patted my cheek without touching it. "Families also listen. Share this if you believe silence deserves a voice. Follow family revenge stories for more real healing. Later at the diner sink, I will rinse the blue jar and set it back where morning light can find it. Later, I will count by touch, nickel, dime, quarter, and hear the small music return. For now, I hold the keys in my hand until the brass takes my warmth. I let the lighthouse make another slow circle over the harbor. I let myself stand still. The gulls lift, the stove sighs, the radio stays off. The fog is thick, but the light still turns. The deed smelled like old linen and courthouse dust. I kept it in a manila envelope under the flower bin, away from steam and hands beside the pink dress I wore the year I decided I would not be poor forever. Paper remembers the oils of your fingers. Brass remembers your heat. When I turned 55, I counted every tip from every night shift nickel on nickel salt on skin and bought the cabin that faces the water's slow breath. I signed a loan. Then I whispered a promise into the wood. A home is a boundary, not a suggestion. He was still a boy to me when I placed the keys in his shaking hand. The morning was bright, the tide pulled back the gulls low and busy. "Ma," he said, eyes wet like first light on the channel, "you gave me a house." I touched his cheek. "I gave you a door you can close. Only special people," my husband used to say, and he meant the kind who know when to open and when to keep the world on the porch. Daniel tucked the envelope inside his jacket like heat against a winter chest. He finally stood taller than his worry. We dressed the cabin together with little things we could afford, a second-hand rug, a kettle that sings when it boils. He painted the sill white. I stitched curtains from the old pink dress after it tore at the shoulder. Its fabric carried the smell of cinnamon and sundaes. We laughed at nothing. We listened to the lighthouse turn slow, patient, deliberate, one white eye sweeping the rocks as if to count us safe. Ava came later, smiling with her eyes more than her mouth. She liked the kettle's song. She touched the curtains and said nothing, but I saw it land in her. Silence remembers, I told myself. Sometimes it keeps a ledger kinder than ink. Their wedding was simple. A borrowed arch, a length of dock turned into an aisle. I pinned a small piece of the pink dress inside his cuff, stitched where he wouldn't feel it. For luck, I said. The river gave us wind like blessing palms. We ate too much cake and danced to a radio with bad reception. When night folded around the harbor, I pressed the keys into his hand one more time, a mother's ritual. Remember, I said, a house is where yes and no live in peace. He nodded. He was good at nodding then. The first visit from her side of the family felt like a holiday. 2 nights full moon laughter that lifted and fell with the tide. She called me Ma without practice, and I let it land. On the 3rd visit, they stayed longer. A week became 2, then the calendar forgot to breathe. It happens that way. The word weekend melts on the tongue until it means whatever the hungriest person wants it to. At the diner, the blue tip jar lost its song. Coins hit softer or not at all. I told myself it was rain or ferry delays or tourists saving bills for ice cream. Then I found the register drawer ajar and a neat note in loopy letters. Borrowed for groceries, Tessa. The air went warm in my palms. Heat. The kind that tells you life is returning and a line has been crossed. "Ma, don't worry," Daniel said when I held up the note. That phrase again. He had learned to keep water out of the boat with his bare hands. They needed food, he added. I'll cover it this week. He was not lying. He believed that love was a wallet you keep open. I poured coffee and watched it steam the window into milk glass. They can ask, I said softly. Asking is part of respect. He squeezed my fingers once as if to smuggle an apology into my skin. Would you have done the same for someone you love if you felt this kind of silence? Tell me below. I took the envelope out that night. I read the deed by the stove's light lips, moving like prayer. The law is plain when paper is clean. The cabin was purchased by me and titled to Daniel before the wedding. Not a joint thing, not a shared thing. A gift full and quiet so his life could start on ground no one could take. I traced his name with a fingertip until the heat of my hand warmed the ink. In the hall, the lighthouse made another patient turn. Only special people I heard again, the ones who tell you the truth even when it sours the tongue. The next morning I found another note. Borrowed for gas coal. The jar was lighter by more than groceries now. I put the notes side by side and felt my pulse settle into a steady working beat. There is anger that burns you hollow. There is anger that heats the tools you need. I chose the second. I folded both notes under a smooth stone and wrote one line on a blank index card. Ask. I set it in the drawer like a clean plate. In the cabin, Ava wiped counters until they shone and smiled too hard at everyone. She was trying to hold a family together with her teeth. I remember that kind of ache. My jaw once did the same. Where did you put the certificate? I asked Daniel that afternoon. Voice as gentle as weather. He blinked, surprised by the question. The deed. He tapped his chest, then the cabinet by the stove, then the junk drawer, searching the places where we keep the most important things near our heart, near our heat, near our mess. We found it where I had left it. He opened the envelope like good news. He read the first line. He read it twice. I watched the truth settle in his shoulders. It did not make him larger. It made him solid. So, it's mine, he said quietly. All yours, I answered, which means your yes counts. Your no, too. He sat down hard the way a man sits when a room stops spinning. The kettle sang. The lighthouse finished another careful sweep. Somewhere outside, a gull dropped a shell, and it burst like a small, clear argument. I wanted to be good, he said. You are, I answered. But goodness doesn't mean open season. He laughed once without humor. I thought I could be generous enough for everyone. Enough, I said. Just that word. It changed the room. Enough is a door that remembers which way it swings. In my mind, I saw the pink dress again, the ripped shoulder, the fishing line stitches that weren't pretty but held. That's what boundaries look like when made by hand. They are practical and a little ugly, and they save you from the weather. You can invite, I told him. You can also uninvite. He nodded, and for the first time, his nod belonged to himself. Share this if you believe silence deserves a voice. Follow Family Revenge Stories for more real healing. I could say I felt triumphant. I did not. I felt the slow relief of a fever breaking. I felt heat leave my face and settle in my palms where work lives. The law was simple, but the heart is not. Ava would stand between the two shores that day. She would hear her own mother's tide pull. She would hear her husband's breath even out. Peace is never a parade. It is a chair pulled back to a table waiting for one honest conversation to begin. When I slid the deed back into its envelope, I tucked the keys beside it. Brass warmed quickly in my hand. Outside the lighthouse threw its white arm over the harbor again and again, counting us in. I breathed with it. In, out, turn, return. The wind lifted the curtains I'd stitched from that dress, and the room smelled like starch and something sweet. Boundaries are not walls. They are fences with gates and names on the posts. Later, when I wiped the blue jar, I listened for the ring of coins and smiled at the space where the sound would come back. It always does when a house remembers its lines. The stove sighed. The floor creaked not in complaint, but in agreement. I set the envelope down beside the flower bin and closed the drawer with both hands. The deed was cool when I touched it. And then it wasn't. Boundaries written in sweat. Is this conversation helpful so far? The air that morning smelled like damp rope and frying oil from the pier Café. The sea hadn't decided its mood yet. Still water silver light, the kind that hides what's coming. I opened the diner window, heard the bell above the door stutter once. Then still, silence. Remembers. By the time I crossed to the cabin, laughter was already spilling out the screen door. Too early for laughter that loud. That's when I knew summer had arrived with no return ticket. Gloria's voice was the first to slice through the gulls. The bay air will do wonders for my lungs. She said it like a prescription, not a visit. By noon, her daughter Piper was unpacking a cage, two ferrets' nervous and curious noses twitching at my floorboards. Cole dragged in a cooler that clinked like a bar on legs, and Tessa, the youngest, planted her sandaled feet right on my wooden table. "Feels like home," she said. "Ava sweet." Ava looked at me with that pleading softness only a daughter-in-law can manage. "They're family, Ma," she whispered. I wanted to ask, "Whose?" Daniel stood by the sink counting bills. His lips moved like prayer. Water, electricity, groceries. I heard the paper sigh in his hands, and something in my throat caught fire. Heat, the kind that means life returning or danger rising. At the diner that afternoon, the blue tip jar sat hollow. Its glass no longer sang. Silence can be louder than a scream when money stops falling where it used to. I wiped the counter, counted what wasn't there, and told myself tourists had turned frugal. Lies are soft things, we use them to cushion what we already know. That night, the house smelled of butter and strangers. Gloria's perfume crawled up the hallway. Laughter spilled from the living room like oil on water. I stood at the door, hand on the knob keys in my pocket, trembling. Daniel slept curled on the couch, one arm under his ribs. I could see the shadow of his spine against the lamplight. My son, my boy, who once slept with a stuffed dolphin until he was 12. Now a grown man, without a bed in his own home. The master door creaked open behind me. Gloria appeared in her robe hair, wrapped in pink curlers. My back, she sighed. "The mattress here is firm, perfect for my spine." She smiled that gentle predator's smile. Women like her learn young. "You don't mind, do you?" I wanted to say it enough, but the words stuck dry and rusted behind my teeth. Morning came with bacon and guilt. Cole cracked open a beer at 9. Tessa hummed off-key. Ava moved like a ghost, pouring orange juice, pretending the world wasn't rearranging itself around her. Daniel smiled for everyone and no one, carrying trash bags out to the porch like it might count as peacekeeping. When Gloria raised her cup and said, "We might stay through July if the weather's kind," I watched my son's shoulders tense. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His silence was a bruise forming under the skin. Would you have done the same, kept quiet to keep peace? If you felt that kind of silence, tell me below. That night, the ferrets escaped. Piper screamed. Cole cursed, and somewhere in the chaos, a picture frame fell a wedding photo of Daniel and Ava cracked clean across the glass. I picked it up, brushed away a shard, and saw my reflection split down the middle. Ma Ava said softly, kneeling to help me gather the pieces. She's my mother. She means well. Meaning, well, I said, is not the same as doing right. Her eyes flickered. She's been through a lot. So has everyone who ever learned to take without asking. She looked away, and I knew that was the moment the small surrender of a good woman torn between two fires. After midnight, I sat alone on the porch. The blue jar from the diner rested beside me, silent, heavy with emptiness. I turned it in my hands. The glass caught moonlight like water trying to become something else. The lighthouse across the bay spun its slow white arc, steady, unbothered, faithful. The world still had rules, even if my house didn't. Only special people, my husband used to say, know when to leave before they wear out their welcome. I whispered it to the wind, but the wind was busy carrying laughter from inside. I think kindness has a flavor. At first, it's sweet like syrup on waffles or a tip folded under a coffee mug. But leave it out too long and it ferments. It turns sticky sour. You can smell when generosity's gone bad. The cabin smelled like that now. When I peeked through the doorway, Gloria was spreading lotion on her calves, feet up on my quilt, the pink curlers catching the moonlight. "You should rest, Margaret," she murmured without looking up. "Let the young ones handle things." I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. Instead, I stepped outside and let the cold bite my skin. The night was sharp honest. Out there, even the silence had manners. In the diner kitchen the next morning, the coffee pot hissed like an old secret. I watched steam curl toward the ceiling and thought about the blue jar, how it used to ring like joy. Maybe homes have bells too. Maybe they stop ringing when too many people forget who built the walls. Daniel brushed past me with a stack of receipts. His eyes were rimmed with fatigue. "Don't worry, Ma. They'll be gone soon." Soon I repeated the way a drowning person says sure. He tried to smile, that careful half-smile meant to calm me, but I saw the cost of it. His goodness was bleeding him dry. If you've ever watched someone kind being swallowed by their own kindness, you know the sound it makes. It's quiet, like fabric tearing in another room. That evening, the tide pulled higher than usual. Water slapped against the dock posts, steady and impatient. I sat by the window listening to the rhythm. The ferrets rustled in their cage. Gloria snored softly from the master bedroom. The house was full yet lonelier than I could stand. I traced the window's fog with one finger, a single line down, like dividing a map in half. From when I whispered, did kindness become permission? The glass didn't answer. Outside, the lighthouse turned again. The same beam, the same circle, the same promise. The world keeps its rhythm even when people lose theirs. The sea rose, then fell. The sound of it swallowed everything. The laughter, the guilt, the exhaustion. Even me. And when I finally closed my eyes, the last thing I heard was that endless, patient tide. The waves took my words before I could say them. The sea swallowed my voice. The sea was quiet that night. Too quiet for July. The air smelled of salt and rusted chains, the kind that live forever under dock wood. I stood there with Daniel, our breath rising like smoke in the cold white beam of the lighthouse. Its light kept turning steady, patient, blind to everything it revealed. Waves touched the pier, soft and certain. I thought of how silence holds more truth than most people dare to speak. The wind shifted then, just slightly, enough to tell me it was time. "Daniel." I began the name, soft, careful. "We should talk about the cabin." He looked at the water instead of me. "Mom, please, not tonight." But the night had already been waiting too long. "I'm not angry," I said. "I just want to remind you, when I bought that place, you were still working double shifts at the mill. It's under your name now, but it was mine before the wedding. My gift to your future, not theirs." He nodded slowly. The light from the lighthouse brushed across his face every few seconds, bright, then gone bright again, like hesitation itself. "I know," he said, "I just don't want to make Ava uncomfortable." The way he said uncomfortable felt smaller than it should, like it had already been used to justify too much. "Uncomfortable," I repeated. "Daniel, you're sleeping on the couch. That's not discomfort, that's surrender." He pressed his hands together, elbows on his knees. "You don't understand, Mom. It's complicated. Gloria's got health issues. Ava feels responsible." I sighed. "Health issues don't give you a right to someone else's bed or their home." For a long moment only the ropes creaked against the posts. I could hear the lighthouse hum, the tide licking its own wounds. You remember I said when I bought that cabin you were 21. I'd saved every tip from the diner, every extra dollar from the night shifts. When I handed you that envelope, your hands shook. He smiled faintly. You told me a house is a boundary. Yes, I whispered. A boundary, not a door anyone can walk through. He dropped his gaze again, and I saw the boy he used to be, gentle, unsure, too kind for a world that trades kindness for convenience. The wind picked up. The air smelled colder, sharper. The waves began slapping against the pylons harder, like a warning. Mom, he said finally, voice low, there's something I should tell you. He hesitated the way people do when they're about to spill truth they wish could stay buried. I let them borrow money from the diner. How much? He shook his head. I don't even know anymore. Tessa said she needed it for groceries. Then Cole needed to cover the boat payment. It just kept happening. The words settled between us, heavy as wet sand. I wanted to shout, but I didn't. I just let the silence stretch long enough for him to hear what I wasn't saying. Silence remembers. After all, it keeps score, even when the world pretends it doesn't. Daniel, I said softly, you've been giving pieces of yourself away, and they won't stop taking until there's nothing left. He swallowed hard. I thought I was helping. You were, but helping becomes enabling when it costs your dignity. For a moment, his eyes glimmered like the sea beneath the lighthouse beam, hurt hope and shame all tangled together. I turned toward the horizon, the cold biting through my sleeves. When I was your age, I said I once stayed silent too long, let people walk over me because I thought peace was better than truth. But peace built on silence doesn't last. It just buries you slower. He didn't answer. He just breathed deep, uneven, real. Son, I whispered, respect doesn't come at the end of surrender. It starts when you say enough. That word hung in the air, enough. It was small, but it had weight, like a key in the hand. He stared at the metal keys glinting in my palm, the ones that opened every door in the cabin. I held them out, and for a moment he didn't move. Then slowly he reached out and took them. Our fingers brushed, and I felt it the shift, like the tide pulling back just before the next wave breaks. Would you have done the same? Would you have chosen truth, even when it shakes what's left of your peace? Tell me below. I'd like to know how others survive this kind of quiet storm. When he finally spoke again, his voice was steadier. I'll fix it, Mom. I promise. I nodded. You don't have to fix everything. Just start by remembering whose name is on the door. The beam of the lighthouse swung back, washing his face in white again. For the first time in weeks, his eyes held something light, faint, but fierce. Thank you, he said, for trusting me enough to tell me the truth. And there it was, the small flicker of the boy who once ran barefoot along this very dock, chasing seagulls with a stick and shouting that the world was big and his. Later, when I walked home, the tide was turning. The current had changed direction, pulling outward instead of in. The air felt different, lighter, freer, like the sea had finally exhaled. I looked back once at the lighthouse. Its beams swept across the bay, unwavering, eternal. The lighthouse still turns, I whispered. Sometimes changing direction doesn't mean leaving the shore. It means staying, just no longer drifting. The wind had shifted, and so had we. The television's blue light painted their faces like moonlight through dirty glass. I reached for the remote and pressed it off. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was thick, waiting, almost aware. Gloria's perfume clung to the air, sweet and expensive, masking the faint, sour note of spilled beer from Cole's open can. The ceiling fan ticked slow and uneven, like an old metronome marking the rhythm of confrontation. Ava's fingers gripped Daniel's sleeve, white-knuckled. I cleared my throat. Let's talk. The word talk sounded heavier than it should have. Gloria smiled first. The kind of smile that pretends to invite warmth but brings its own chill. In this house, she said, family doesn't need rules. Her tone was honey wrapped around barbed wire. I let the words settle. Then I answered quietly, in America, property does. The air stiffened. Even the fan seemed to hesitate. I stood, walked to the hallway, and returned with a small wooden sign, the one from my diner, that read, open on one side and closed on the other. I placed it gently in the center of the coffee table. The sound of wood meeting glass was soft, but final. This home, I said, has been open for too long. It's time to set hours. Cole's chair creaked as he leaned forward. He smirked. You're joking, right? Do I look like I'm joking about the roof over your head? I asked. He looked away. The smirk disappeared. Let's start simple, I continued. Who's paying for what electricity, water, food? No one answered. The refrigerator hummed in the next room, the only voice brave enough to speak. I waited. I had patience. It's something life teaches you when you've had to survive on tip money and sleepless nights. Ava finally whispered, "Please, let's not do this tonight." Her voice trembled. I saw fear there, not of me, but of the truth beginning to stand up. "I'm not here to fight, Ava," I said softly. "I'm here to remind everyone that fairness still matters." She looked at me, eyes wet. "They're my family." "And Daniel is mine," I replied. "But love doesn't pay the light bill." Daniel's jaw tightened. His hands locked together, silent fists of guilt. Gloria chuckled under her breath. "You act like we're strangers, Margaret. We're family." "Guests," I said quietly, "eventually go home." Cole leaned forward again. "Daniel invited us," he said. The room went still. Even the hum of the refrigerator faded, as if the house itself was listening. I turned to my son. He didn't meet my eyes. He didn't say a word. His silence hung between us, thick and suffocating. And in that moment I understood sometimes silence doesn't protect the innocent. It protects the guilty. Would you have spoken up or stayed quiet too, if you've ever been trapped in that kind of silence? Tell me below. I took a slow breath. Then, let's make things clear, I said. If you live here, your name goes on the list. If you use water, you pay your share. And the master bedroom, I paused, belongs to the owners of this house, not the visitors. Ava's lips trembled. I could see the battle behind her eyes, loyalty versus logic. Gloria's smile thinned to a blade. "My back needs that bed," she said. "Surely you wouldn't want an old woman to suffer." I looked straight at her. "Old," I said gently, "is not the same as entitled." The words fell like a curtain closing on a scene. No one moved. Then Daniel stood. His voice cracked, but carried. "She's right." Ava grabbed his arm. "Daniel, please." He shook his head. "No, Ava. Mom's right." There it was again, that faint light I'd seen before when he took the keys by the dock. A flicker of the boy he used to be, before fear taught him how to shrink. "Thank you," I said quietly. He nodded, eyes shining in the dim light. "I didn't mean for things to get this far." "I know," I told him. "But silence grows like mold, Daniel. It spreads where there's warmth and kindness, until it covers everything." After they left the room one by one, Ava pale and trembling, Cole muttering, Gloria pretending to yawn, I stayed where I was. The wooden sign still sat on the table. I turned it slowly from open to closed. The sound was barely audible, but the meaning was enormous. Later, Daniel came back alone. He sat beside me, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. "I thought keeping quiet meant keeping peace," he said. I reached over and touched his hand. "Peace without truth," I said, "is just a polite kind of prison." He looked at me, then really looked, and I saw it, the first breath of self-respect rising again in him. Outside through the window, the lighthouse beams swept across the dark bay. Slow, relentless, forgiving. I left the door slightly open that night, just a crack enough for the air to breathe. Silence can suffocate, but truth needs oxygen. The beam from the lighthouse slid once more across the living room wall, tracing a thin white line between shadow and dawn. The sign on the table stayed flipped to closed. But the door remained open, for truth. Because sometimes you close what's false to let honesty walk in. And as I sat there, I realized the lighthouse still turns. The morning light spilled through the blinds in thin, sharp lines like the world itself had chosen to draw boundaries for me. The air was still heavy with the smell of old coffee and sea salt. I set my phone on the kitchen counter beside the folded property deed and the small silver key that once hung from Daniel's first keychain. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that warns you something is about to shift. When I pressed speaker, my voice didn't shake. "Carter, are you there?" "I'm here," he said, his tone steady, clipped like a man used to closing doors gently but firmly. I could feel eyes watching from the living room, Gloria on the couch, Ava beside her, Cole pretending not to listen. The phone's small red light glowed like a warning flare. "Can you confirm," I asked, "that the cabin was purchased before Daniel's marriage?" "Yes," Carter replied. "It's legally his separate property. He has the right to decide who may stay. If anyone refuses to leave after being asked, it's considered trespassing." The room didn't breathe. Even the ocean outside seemed to stop. Gloria blinked slowly, her lips parting in disbelief. Cole looked away. Ava's fingers twisted the hem of her sleeve until the thread snapped. Daniel's face turned pale guilt, carving small lines where youth used to live. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. "You all heard that," I said. "You have 48 hours to make arrangements." The words landed like stones across calm water, rippling, spreading, reaching every corner of the room. Gloria's eyes narrowed, her tone softening into a manipulative sweetness I'd heard 1,000 times before. "Margaret," she said, "you're an old woman. Why be so rigid? This is family. I looked at the empty tip jar on the counter, the one that used to jingle with coins and gratitude. It stood hollow now, as if echoing her question. "I'm not rigid, Gloria," I said. "I'm firm about what's been emptied." Silence again. But this time it wasn't mine. It belonged to them. Would you have done the same? When law and heart collide, which one do you follow? Carter spoke once more. "If you need written notice, I can draft it today." "Thank you," I said quietly. "That won't be necessary. The truth has already been spoken." When I ended the call, the sound of the disconnection felt like an ending and a beginning all at once, a clean break in the air. Gloria stood. Her gold bracelets clinked as she gestured toward me. "You'll regret making a scene," she hissed. I didn't flinch. "Scenes are temporary," I said. "Boundaries last." Her expression faltered. She wasn't used to people calling her bluff. Then something unexpected happened. Ava, sweet, uncertain. Ava looked at her mother with hesitation. For the first time since this all began, her loyalty trembled. "Mom," she whispered, "maybe we should go. Just for a while." The words hung there like soft rain before a storm breaks. Gloria turned sharply, the room catching its breath. "Don't you dare take her side," she said. But Ava's eyes, for once, didn't fall. She looked between me and Daniel, her face full of confusion and something close to realization. That's how it starts, you know, the shift. Not with shouting, not with victory, with one quiet person finally seeing what's real. When the room emptied, I stayed by the window. Outside, the waves rolled steady, indifferent to the noise of human pride. The lighthouse's beam swept slowly across the bay, cutting through the mist like a truth no one could ignore. I placed the key beside the deed and traced my finger over Daniel's name. He had been afraid of confrontation, afraid of disappointing, of breaking what he thought was peace. But real peace doesn't beg permission, it stands. Silence remembers, I whispered to myself, but now so does the law. As I sat down, I thought about how easily we confuse kindness with surrender, how quickly we trade justice for comfort. The law wasn't my weapon, it was my witness. I once believed that keeping quiet kept love alive, but all silence does is let other people write your story, and I was done letting them hold the pen. If you've ever had to choose between harmony and honesty, you know the ache of it. You know how truth burns before it heals. That night, I turned off every light except one, the small lamp by the window. Its glow touched the deed, the key, and the silent phone beside them. I thought of Carter's calm voice, of Ava's trembling, one of Gloria's fury trying to mask fear. And I realized something simple, something freeing. Laws don't protect possessions, they protect clarity. And clarity is peace. The lighthouse beam crossed the window again, slow and steady, sweeping over the room like forgiveness, rising relentless, unbending. The lighthouse still turns, and this time the boundary speaks. The wind carried the smell of salt and anger that morning. The dock creaked beneath our feet, waves slapping the wood like impatient hands. I stood with the green tip jar in my hands, cracked lid, missing its emptiness, louder than any voice around me. The gulls circled above, crying into the wind, as if mocking how small we'd all become. Tessa's shout tore through the air first. "You're ungrateful, Margaret. After everything we did for this family." "Ungrateful." The words snapped like a wet rope in my chest. Piper started crying, clutching her sweater like it could keep her safe from what was coming. Cole puffed his chest, ready to fight words with volume. And then Gloria stepped forward, her voice sharp and self-righteous. "Blood before rules," she said. "You can't just throw family out. Blood comes first." I looked at her for a long moment. The wind pushed her hair back, the sun catching the edge of her gold earrings. Behind her, Ava stood frozen, Daniel beside her, eyes dark, hollow, exhausted. "No, Gloria," I said finally. "Respect comes first. Bills come next. Blood only after both." Her face stiffened, but I didn't stop. I opened my small notebook. "Let's talk numbers," I said. "Electric $342 overdue. Water $176. Groceries averaging $600 a month. Missing tip money $200 each week for the last 3 weeks." I held the cracked jar up so they could see. This was supposed to be our breathing room, the little extra to get through winter. But it's been drained dry. The wind howled through the masts, carrying our silence out over the water. Gloria's jaw tightened. "You're really keeping score." "Yes," I said quietly, "because someone has to." "Would you have done the same?" "When love becomes a debt, do you still call it love?" Tessa crossed her arms, voice trembling with fury. "You've lost your heart, old woman. You're bitter." I almost smiled. "No, dear. I just stopped paying interest on guilt." Cole muttered something I didn't catch, but I didn't care. My eyes were on Ava, the only one who still had tears instead of venom. Then it happened. Ava's voice cracked like glass. "Mom, stop." Gloria turned. "Ava," but Ava didn't flinch this time. "Please," she whispered, "just stop. You've hurt everyone trying to prove you're right." Her mother's eyes widened, the kind of shock that comes not from insult, but from truth. The storm broke not outside, but within. Daniel rubbed his temples, his voice rough. "I'm tired," he said. Just 2 words, but they carried the weight of years. The wind hit harder, sweeping hair across faces, pushing us all towards something inevitable. Piper sobbed louder. Tessa cursed the air. Cole stomped off toward the truck, but Gloria stayed her pride too heavy to move. "Daniel," she hissed, "you'd choose her over your own family." He didn't look at her. "She is my family." And with that, the sound left the world. Even the seagulls stopped screaming. For a long moment, no one moved. The sunlight flickered off the water like fractured glass. Then Ava turned to me, eyes full of guilt. "I knew," she whispered. "I knew what they were doing. I didn't stop them. I just didn't want Mom to get angry." Her tears broke me more than any insult could. "I know, sweetheart," I said softly. "Fear makes silence look like safety. But silence doesn't protect. It just delays the truth." She nodded, covering her face. "I'm sorry." I put a hand on her shoulder. "Apologies mean nothing to the sea, Ava. You just learn and row forward." The jar slipped in my hand, hitting the dock with a dull crack, the last of the glass giving way beneath my fingers. A small shard caught the sunlight, trembling before falling into the water. That was the sound of the storm breaking. We didn't yell anymore. We didn't cry. We just stood there, the 5 of us breathing in the wreckage. I thought about every coin that once filled that jar, every cup of coffee poured to earn them, every act of kindness mistaken for permission. And I thought, maybe it's time to stop counting loss and start naming lessons. If you've ever had to choose between truth and belonging, you know what it costs. As the tide rose, I walked to the edge of the dock. The water kissed the soles of my shoes, cool and steady. I looked out at the horizon, the lighthouse beam still sweeping through the mist, turning steady alive. I whispered, "It still turns." Behind me, Daniel stood quietly, one hand on Ava's shoulder. Gloria's voice was somewhere behind us, breaking apart like the wind itself. But I didn't turn around. Some storms you don't walk back into. The waves reached higher, touching the bottom of the dock. The sound was soft, almost kind. The storm was over. The lighthouse still turns. And the waves had finally reached my feet. The smell of old grease clung to my hands that morning. It was the kind that never truly leaves years of frying eggs, pouring coffee, serving strangers who told their whole lives over pie. The diner was empty now, the chairs turned up on tables, the clock ticking above the window like a reminder that truth has its own schedule. Daniel had left the key on the counter, a small note beside it. "Use this code, Mom. You'll understand." I stood before the small metal safe beneath the register. For years it had guarded nothing more dangerous than spare cash and memories. But today it felt like it held the last piece of light before the storm broke. The safe clicked open with a tired sigh. Inside was a stack of receipts bound by a rubber band gone brittle. They smelled faintly of oil and lemon cleaner, the scent of my life measured in transactions. I laid them out across the counter. Faded ink smudged totals and notes written in Daniel's neat block letters. Tessa advance, Cole cash withdrawal, family expenses. So many advances, so many family expenses. My hands trembled. I reached for one at random, an ATM slip dated the same day the bar next door closed out a tab under the name Tessa R. The lie was simple, almost lazy. That's what made it hurt most. When I stepped out of the diner, the air carried the kind of heat that only comes before a reckoning. The sky over the harbor was steel gray, the lighthouse beam slicing through mist like a blade too clean to be merciful. They were already there, Gloria, Tessa, Cole, and Ava. Daniel stood apart, quiet, the weight of silence pressing on his shoulders. Gloria saw the papers in my hand and froze. "Where did you get those?" she asked. I set them on the table between us. "From the truth," I said. "It's been hiding under your good intentions." Her voice turned brittle. "You don't understand. That money was for Ava's uncle. He's been sick." I nodded slowly, then slid another paper forward, a bar receipt, time-stamped the same night. Her face drained of color. The silence stretched sharp as glass. Tessa started to cry, babbling excuses about helping family, about needing time. Cole muttered something about loans that everyone forgot to pay back. But Gloria didn't speak. She just stared at the papers, lips pressed tight, eyes darting toward Daniel like she could still control the story if she found the right word fast enough. And then a voice came from the doorway behind her. "I've seen it all, Gloria." It was Ray. Her ex-husband. His voice was tired, hollow, the kind of tone that comes from years of pretending not to see the truth. He stepped forward, eyes on Daniel. "She told them they could take it," he said. "Said you were too kind to notice, that you'd never fight back." The room exhaled like the world itself was finally finished holding its breath. Gloria's mouth opened, then closed again. She tried to reach for words, but all that came was a whisper. "I just wanted them to have more." I met her gaze. "You took it from the only person who never asked for more." Her shoulders sagged, the fight drained from her eyes, replaced by something worse, shame. Ava sobbed quietly. "Mom, you said it was all for family." Gloria's reply was small, broken. "I thought it was. Would you have done the same?" When excuses shatter, what part of love survives the fall? I turned back to Daniel. "How long have you known?" His voice cracked. I guessed. I just didn't want to believe it. I nodded. Belief is a kind liar. It lets us keep the peace while it steals our strength. He looked down. "I'm sorry, Mom." "You have nothing to apologize for," I said softly. "Kindness isn't your flaw, Daniel. It's their test." The wind rose outside, rattling the windows. The receipts scattered across the table, one by one, drifting to the floor like falling leaves. I watched them settle, the proof of betrayal carried by air, not anger. After they left, I stayed behind. The diner lights flickered, catching the edges of the greasy papers. I gathered them carefully one by one until the stack fit back into my hands. They were lighter now. Truth always weighs less than lies. I slid the receipts into a drawer and locked it. Not to hide them, but to remind myself that clarity deserves safekeeping. I sat at the counter, resting my palms against the cool surface. "Silence remembers," I whispered. It always does. The sun began to sink, painting the harbor in molten gold. Outside, the lighthouse beam turned again, cutting through the fog like it was searching for something worth saving. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was all of us. The safe was empty now. But the room was full of something cleaner than forgiveness. It was truth. And it glowed. The beam of the lighthouse swept across the window, landing softly on the stack of receipts. The ink shimmered faintly in the light, names, numbers, and memories too costly to forget. The lighthouse still turns. And tonight, it shines straight into the dark. The morning broke heavy with fog, the kind that swallows sound, leaving only breath and heartbeat. The cabin stood quiet against the gray horizon, the air thick with sea salt and old wood. I could hear the ticking of the wall clock echoing through the silence, steady, expectant. When Daniel stepped into the room, something in his shoulders had changed. He wasn't the boy I raised that morning. He was a man who had measured his own truth overnight and decided to speak it out loud. Outside, the waves hit the shore slow and deliberate. Inside, the air waited for judgment. And then he spoke. "This cabin," he said, voice deep but trembling, "is mine. My mother built it with her life, her years, her breath. Anyone who stays, signs an agreement, contributes their share, if not leave before tomorrow's sunset." The words dropped like stones into still water. Each syllable rippled through the room, touching every face. Gloria's jaw clenched, her voice rising sharp and wounded. "You'd throw out your own blood for her?" Daniel didn't flinch. "No," he said. "I'm choosing respect." The sound of that word, respect, cut cleaner than any knife. It was quiet power. It was inherited steel. "Would you have done the same?" If the line between duty and dignity blurred. Ava stood near the staircase, her hands trembling. I saw the battle play across her face, love, fear, guilt, and the fragile hope of peace. Then she moved, slowly, deliberately. She picked up her mother's suitcase from the floor and carried it to the porch. Gloria's breath caught. "Ava, what are you doing?" Ava's voice broke, but her words were steady. "I'm doing what you never could, Mom. I'm letting go." The world seemed to stop for a moment. Even the sea held its breath. Gloria screamed, raw, desperate. "You'd choose an outsider over your own mother." Daniel's eyes softened, but his voice didn't waver. "I'm choosing what's right." Gloria's face collapsed into something small, almost childlike. Her anger couldn't find its footing anymore. She looked at me, and for a second I saw the woman she once was, the one who wanted to love but never learned how without control. I didn't answer her look. Some silences aren't made for mercy. When the door closed behind her, the sound wasn't loud. It was final. Daniel stood still, hand on the lock. Then he turned the key. The metal clicked a sound like a heartbeat reclaiming rhythm. He hung the new key on the wall hook beside the closed sign and flipped it down. For the first time in months, the sign matched the truth. I watched him in the dim light filtering through the curtains. His face was pale, but peaceful. The kind of peace that costs everything. "Are you sure?" I asked quietly. He nodded. "If I keep the door open for everyone, Mom, There won't be a home left for anyone. I exhaled slowly. You sound like your father. He smiled faintly. You always said he taught through storms. Yes, I said, but he learned from the lighthouse. Ava stood by the window, her arms crossed against herself. Tears traced the edge of her jaw, but she didn't wipe them away. I'm scared, she whispered. Daniel reached for her hand. So am I, but fear doesn't mean we're wrong. Their hands met steady, human alive, and in that moment I understood freedom doesn't roar. It trembles, it breathes, it chooses. If you've ever stood at that threshold between what's safe and what's right, you know the ache of it. The air felt lighter by evening. The fog had thinned, leaving streaks of amber across the bay. I stepped outside and saw the faint beam of the lighthouse begin its slow rotation, sweeping through the dusk like a guardian that never sleeps. It kept turning just as it always had, constant, patient, forgiving. The house behind me was quiet, but alive again. The tension had left, replaced by something honest and raw, the kind of silence that remembers, not haunts. I whispered to the sea, he's free now. The waves answered softly, folding against the shore. As the sun dipped behind the water, Daniel came to stand beside me. His eyes followed the horizon. Do you think she'll ever forgive us? He asked. I smiled faintly. Maybe. Or maybe forgiveness isn't what we need. He turned to me. Then what do we need? I looked toward the lighthouse, its beam steady golden. Clarity, I said, and the courage to stand in it. He nodded. The light swept across his face, washing away the last trace of doubt. When I went back inside, I turned the close sign one last time, feeling the weight of its movement. The air inside the cabin was warm again, the faint smell of coffee, the hum of the heater, the pulse of a new beginning. Freedom is never free. It costs comfort, illusion, and sometimes blood ties, but it gives you back your breath. The key glinted under the lamplight, small but mighty. The lighthouse still turns. The door is closed, and the heart is open. The morning light came through the curtains in thin gold threads, soft and forgiving. The smell of pine and soap filled the air, mingling with the faint brine that still clung to the window frames. The cabin felt lighter, as if the walls themselves were breathing again. Daniel was already in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, sponge in hand. The rhythmic sound of his wiping circle after circle matched the tide outside. Ava stood by the sink, quietly folding new linens, her movements tender, uncertain, but sincere. For the first time in a long while, silence wasn't heavy. It was gentle. That morning we cleaned not just the cabin, but what had been left between us. We started with the smallest things. The curtains first shaken, washed, and hung to dry in the sun. Then the sheets white cotton with faint blue stitching, the kind that smells like promise when new. I scrubbed the stove until it gleamed, each motion a small redemption. The salt stains along the windowsills, the sticky corners of drawers, the marks left by anger and neglect, all of it slowly giving way to warmth and effort. Ava lit a pine-scented candle and placed it near the window. For fresh beginnings, she whispered. I smiled. Fresh beginnings need clean hands, not just good sense. She laughed softly. The sound was small but alive. Daniel found an old wedding photo in a drawer, a black and white print from years ago. The frame cracked, but the smile's intact. He wiped the dust gently and placed it back on the shelf near the clock. That's where it belongs, he said. Ava looked at the photo for a long moment. Then quietly she reached into her purse and pulled out a folded envelope. This is for you, she said, sliding it across the counter. Inside was cash, her first repayment. Her voice trembled. It's not much, but it's a start. I want to do this right. I nodded slowly, the weight of her gesture heavier than the money itself. Every clean page begins with a first line, I said. She looked at me, eyes wet, hopeful. Then, will you teach me? I reached for the green tip jar, the one that had once been broken, now glued, sealed, and ready again. We'll start here, I said. We keep a ledger sign, each note lock it in the safe. Discipline and kindness, that's how we begin again. Would you have forgiven if rebuilding meant work instead of words? We made clam chowder for dinner. The smell filled the cabin, rich, creamy, carrying warmth through every corner. I baked cornbread, the kind my mother used to make on Sundays. Daniel set the table quietly. No one spoke much, but every sound, the clinking of spoons, the bubbling of soup, the faint splash of waves outside, felt like prayer. As we ate, I noticed Ava glancing at the window, often eyes tracing the fog drifting over the bay. It's strange, she said softly. After all that noise, the quiet feels like home. I nodded. That's how peace sounds at first, like it's afraid to stay. She smiled through her tears. Then we'll make it stay. After dinner, Daniel reached under the counter and pulled out the green jar. He dropped in the day's small tips, a few bills, some coins. The soft clink echoed like a heartbeat. We all paused. That sound after everything felt like life returning. Ava looked at me. "I've booked a therapist," she said. "Family sessions if you'll come. I think we all need to learn how to be close without hurting." I studied her face, the courage in it, the humility. "Boundaries don't break love," I said. "They help it breathe." The candlelight flickered across her hands. "Then let's breathe together." Later, when the dishes were done and the table cleared, I sat with her on the porch. The air smelled of sea and candle wax. In the distance, the lighthouse beam turned slowly, sweeping across the bay. "I used to think healing was a feeling," I said. "Something that arrives when pain leaves." She looked at me, and now I know it's a choice, I said. An action, a discipline. The beam passed again, lighting the water in brief gold. "Healing is a verb," I whispered. "You move toward it even when it hurts. If you've ever tried to start again after breaking something precious, tell me, how did you begin?" The night grew quiet, soft waves lapping against the dock. The sound of the green jar came again. Daniel counting, recording, Ava laughing gently when the coins slipped through her fingers. I watched them through the window, the way the lamplight brushed over their faces. Something inside me, something old, brittle, guarded, finally exhaled. The world didn't feel fixed, but it felt possible. The fog lifted slowly from the bay, and the beam from the lighthouse reached farther, its light stretching into the horizon, steady and sure. The jar gave one final soft clink as Daniel closed the ledger. "The lighthouse still turns. The house is clean." And the sound of healing rings like coins in a jar. The afternoon light was pale, almost silver when he came in. The door creaked softly behind him, letting in the cold scent of sea wind and old regrets. Ray stood by the window, the same seat Gloria once claimed like a throne. His hands were trembling slightly, the kind of tremor that comes from carrying too many apologies for too long. Outside, gulls floated low over the water, their cries sharp against the stillness. The lighthouse beam swept across the harbor, cutting through the mist with quiet insistence. It was that same light that had witnessed every storm we'd survived. He sat down without a word. For a while, we just listened to the clock ticking, to the air breathing between us. Then he spoke. "I should have stopped her," he said, eyes fixed on the fog. "All those years, I saw Gloria cross line after line, and I did nothing." His voice cracked on the word nothing. I didn't rush to fill the silence. Some truths only grow when left to echo. He took a slow breath, rubbed his palms together. "I thought if I said something she'd leave me again. So I let her twist things, lie to your boy, hurt your peace, just so I wouldn't be alone." The words landed like small stones in water, rippling outward, each confession stirring something deep. Loneliness, it makes cowards of the gentle. "Would you have spoken sooner if love demanded you risk losing it?" He reached into his jacket and pulled out a worn envelope, the edges bent from worry. He placed it on the table next to the spare key he once took, now returned. "That's for Ava and Daniel," he said quietly. "Money and a letter. It's not payment. It's a start." I looked at the key, then the envelope. 2 small symbols of surrender, one for forgiveness, one for accountability. Ray's eyes were red-rimmed with sleepless years. "I told Gloria I'd come back for her," he whispered. "Not to rescue her. To walk with her through the wreckage she made. We'll begin by paying back what she took. Every cent, every broken promise." I felt a strange ache rise in my chest, something between pity and respect. The kind of ache that knows redemption never arrives pretty. For a long moment, we sat in quiet. The candle on the counter flickered wax dripping like slow tears. The sea beyond the glass shimmered faintly as the sun tried to break through. Ray exhaled. "I'm not asking for your blessing, just your understanding." I nodded. "Understanding doesn't erase the past," I said, "but it can stop the bleeding." He looked down at his hands, weathered and strong, now shaking. "Maybe that's enough." "Enough," I repeated softly. The word lingered in the air, round and fragile, like forgiveness learning to walk again. He stood, but didn't move toward the door. Instead, he looked at the shelves, the photographs, the old diner mugs, the chipped clock that had seen too much life. "You kept it all," he said. "Yes," I replied, "because memory is the rent we pay for truth." He smiled faintly, his eyes glassy. "Then I owe a lot." His laugh was soft, cracked at the edges, but real, the kind of laugh that knows the price of silence. He turned toward me again. "I've drafted something, a boundary agreement," he said. "Every visit, every conversation written down, respected. I don't trust my will without walls anymore." The gesture stunned me. Few men of his age would put pride beneath paper. The lighthouse light cut through again, grazing his face like quiet absolution. When he left, the envelope remained on the table, next to the key. I stared at them for a long time, listening to the distant hum of the sea. Maybe this was what repentance really looked like, not grand gestures, but returning what was never yours to keep. I touched the key gently. It was cold, heavy, real. Then the envelope warm from his hand, still trembling from confession. "Silence remembers," I whispered. "It always does." Later that night, Daniel came by. I handed him the envelope without a word. He opened it, read slowly, his eyes widening, softening. "What should we do with it?" he asked. "Keep it," I said. "Forgiveness is currency too, but it must be earned." He nodded, thoughtful. "Do you think people change?" I looked out the window. The lighthouse turned again, steady as ever, its light cutting through a night that refused to stay dark. "Yes," I said finally. "If they choose to kneel before the truth, not behind it." The diner was quiet again after he left. I sat by the window where Ray had been the faint outline of his coffee cup, still marking the table. The smell of pine and salt lingered, mingling with something new, peace maybe, or closure wearing humility's clothes. The wind picked up outside, brushing through the open cracks like an old song rediscovered. I closed my eyes and let the sound fill me. No one is too late, if they're willing to bow their head. Would you forgive yourself first before asking others to do the same? The sea grew calm as dusk fell. The last rays of sunlight painted a gold line across the water leading straight to the lighthouse. It still turned slow and faithful, never judging the darkness it illuminated. The envelope remained on the counter, and the spare key gleamed beside it. Two small proofs that even the guilty can return home when they've learned how to lower their gaze. The lighthouse still turns, and tonight, one man turned with it. The sea was quiet that morning, too quiet, almost holy, the kind of stillness that feels like forgiveness. From the porch, I could smell coffee drifting from the kitchen, rich, dark, steady. The windows were open, letting in the cool salt air, and for the first time in months, it didn't sting. It soothed. Inside, laughter came from the kitchen. Ava's laughter, light, unguarded, free. She was at the stove sleeves, rolled up, stirring soup as Daniel poured coffee for a table of early customers. The sound of spoons, mugs, and voices melted together like an old hymn, unrehearsed, but somehow in perfect harmony. The green tip jar glimmered in the morning light. Every clink of a coin felt like a heartbeat. Peace doesn't always arrive with silence. Sometimes it hums softly through ordinary sounds. It had been 1 month since the storm ended. The cab and the cafe had found its rhythm again. Daniel's hands, once clenched by worry, now moved with calm purpose. Ava's eyes, once full of guilt, carried warmth again. She laughed easily, spoke gently, listened more than she defended. Even the regulars who'd avoided us during the chaos had returned, drawn by something they couldn't name. They came for coffee, yes, but they stayed for the calm. I wiped down the counter, the wood smooth beneath my palms. It smelled faintly of lemon oil and salt. As I reached for the brass hook by the door, my hand paused over the small metal sign, "Open." The same one I'd turned to closed so many painful times. I hung it carefully. It caught the morning light and glowed faintly. This time open didn't mean exposed. It meant ready. The noon sun washed through the windows, painting gold lines on the floor. Daniel leaned against the counter, watching Ava serve a family at the corner table. His smile was soft, quiet pride, the kind that doesn't need to be spoken. He looked at me and said, "Feels like home again, doesn't it?" I nodded. "Home isn't about who stays," I said. "It's about what survives." He thought for a moment, then smiled. "And what keeps turning?" Outside, the lighthouse's beam flickered across the bay. Its light traveled far, even in daylight, constant, unchanging. The lighthouse still turns. That afternoon, the mail came. A single envelope, handwritten, familiar loops in the ink. Gloria's handwriting. I took it to the porch and sat with it for a while. The air smelled of pine and sugar, the kitchen still baking. I opened it slowly, feeling the tremor in my own hands. Her words were simple, shaky, but sincere. "I'm learning how to be a mother again, this time without taking what isn't mine." There was no bitterness in her writing, no excuses, just the small honesty of a woman finally standing still. I folded the letter and walked to the drawer where the old keys hung. Among them was the spare, the one Ray had returned. I slipped the letter beside it. Forgiveness, I've learned, doesn't erase locks. It teaches you when to open and when to close. Would you dare to reopen your heart if it meant risking pain again? The evening light softened the cafe. The chatter slowed. A soft song played from the small radio, crackling with warmth. Ava brought me a cup of tea and sat across from me, her hands still carrying the faint scent of flower. "We're booked for next weekend," she said, smiling. "Can you believe it?" I took a sip, the tea sweet and steady. "Yes," I said. Because peace draws people more than perfection ever could. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For staying." Her eyes shimmered. "For teaching me that kindness can have rules." I smiled faintly. Boundaries don't kill love, they give it breath. Later, when the last guest left and Daniel turned off the front light, the room dimmed into the kind of quiet that feels earned. I stood by the door, my hand brushing the open sign. The brass was warm from the day's touch. Above it, the old keyring swayed gently, its metal glinting like starlight. Those keys once locked away anger, pain, pride. Now they just hung quietly, symbols of choice. Behind me I heard laughter again, Ava's voice, Daniel's low hum of a song. It was the sound of repair. Outside, the sea glowed under the moonlight, glassy and endless. The lighthouse turned its slow, faithful circle, steady, patient, eternal. The light reached across the water and brushed against the cafe windows, painting soft ripples of gold across the glass. Inside, everything shimmered, the cups, the wood, the faces I loved. Peace doesn't come from silence or surrender. It comes from balance, when forgiveness meets boundaries, when love stops begging and starts choosing. The world had spun a full circle, the same porch, the same sea, but a different kind of woman standing on it. I whispered to the horizon, "The lighthouse still turns." I turned off the lights except the one above the door, the soft yellow bulb that cast warmth into the street. I looked at the sign once more. Open. I smiled. If today you could hang a sign on your own heart, what would it say? Mine says open. The light glowed brighter against the night air. The sea rested. The house breathed. The light is on and the heart is open.